Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to this first session of Wednesday. So it's our second invited speaker, Vadim Lyubashevsky. So Vadim received his PhD in 2008 from UCSD, not MIT, after which he spent 2 years as a postdoc at Tel Aviv University. Already then, Vadim's main area of research is quantum-safe cryptography based on the hardness of lattice problems. And at the time, he co-authored a lattice-based NIST-3 submission, namely SwiftX, and that didn't have the best of fates. But from 2010 to 2015, he was a researcher at INRIA in Paris, and during that period, he introduced, together with Chris Peiket and Oded Regov, the celebrated ring LRE problem, which is just one example of the influential foundational work on constructions of efficient cryptographic primitives, including encryption, digital signatures, and zero-knowledge proofs. Currently, Vadim is a principal research scientist in the cryptography group at IBM Research Europe in Zurich, and he was awarded an ERC starting grant in 2014 and an ERC consolidated grant in 2020. A lot of his designs have been used as blueprints for submissions by many various groups to the recently completed NIST post-quantum standardization process. And in fact, he is part of the consortium of both schemes, crystals Kyber and crystals dilithium, which were chosen as the primary standards. However, there's still a lot of work to be done from NIST selections of those two very basic primitives to the deployment of a rich lattice-based cryptographic ecosystem. And with his experience, Vadim is ideally placed to interpolate from what happened during the standardization process to what should or could happen next. And we are very pleased he is here today. So let's give a warm round of welcome to our second invited speaker, Vadim Lyubashevsky.
Okay, thank you, Martijn. Thank you, Karmit, for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the NIST standardization process and more about other random things. Yeah, you actually didn't put my updated title on there. It was more about musings about cryptography, lattice-based cryptography, so it's a little more informal until maybe the end. But let's see what happens. So yeah, I should talk a little bit about the NIST PQC standardization. This is something that happened recently, and a lot of people were involved, and this could affect the future of cryptography. So this is about standardization of quantum-safe crypto, so basic just chems and digital signatures. So it started in about 2015 when the NSA said, well, the US government should use quantum-safe crypto. So they should, if you haven't switched to elliptic curves, they're suite B. Don't wait for quantum-safe crypto. But of course, there was no standardized quantum-safe crypto at that point. So, I mean, in the US, the rules are the US government has to use some standardized things by NIST. So NIST, of course, had to then announce a competition for quantum-safe chems and digital signatures. So this is very similar to what they did for SHA and AES. So they had experience running this. This was a popular thing for cryptographers to kind of congregate in. And so they said, let's do the same thing for quantum-safe crypto. Of course, there was a bit of a difference here because this was public key, whereas the other stuff is symmetric key, so things would be a bit different. And that's why they expected several standards in each category, so main and backups, because public key crypto has to be based on some mathematical assumptions, and quantum computers already broke some, so well, let's have backups in case they break others. And so they declared this competition, 69 total submissions. And 5 years later, they selected some initial standards. It was 1 chem and 3 digital signatures. And in about a year from now, they expect to have fully written standards that people can implement. So a question that is often asked, I mean, in the US, it's not asked in Europe and other places, it's why do people care about NIST standards? This is a very US-centric, NIST only cares about what the US government, implements. Why does the rest of the world care? And the reason is, okay, one is kind of obvious. Well, the US does a lot of business with the rest of the world. If it has some standards, others, if they want to kind of be compliant or kind of communicate with the US, they should use the same things. Okay. So, but the other one is that, well, this is kind of arbitrary, but this is what happened, that NIST competitions have a tradition of attracting a lot of designers and cryptanalysts, and this is what you want when you deploy new cryptographic schemes. You want some place where all these people congregate to, and sort of eventually come up with the best schemes. And it could have been anywhere, you know, it could be any other government body that kind of had this reputation, but somehow people said, well, NIST has this reputation, so maybe this is where they will congregate. And of course, another thing is, well, let's say you don't care about what NIST selects, but still, because there's a lot of people fighting it out, maybe you don't want to pick what NIST chose, but a lot of the other schemes received a lot of attention too, so maybe you can pick those. So it's also a good place to get ideas for other types of schemes. So what happened at NIST? So they chose one encryption scheme, CHEM, so this was Kyber. And they chose 3 digital signatures, dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx. So 3 of the 4 are based on lattices. And Sphinx is based on hash functions. So I'm not going to really explain, I mean, maybe the idea was to explain the schemes, but I'm not going to do this. I mean, it's been around for 6 years, and there's many, many presentations online describing them. So if you haven't seen them, it's probably because you don't care. And there's nothing wrong with it at all, right? But I don't want to use the invited talk to talk about things you don't care about. So, okay. So I'm not going to talk about the schemes, so let's see what else is happening. Well, there's the Belgians. We have to talk about the Belgians. I mean, they're used to winning all these competitions with AES, SHA-3. And then kind of during the NIST thing, kind of started looking like they weren't going to win it. And so they went completely berserk, started breaking everything. So we had Rainbow gone, Psyche gone. So at this point, NIST kind of smartly stepped in and said, okay, look, it's not over. We'll have another round. Maybe, maybe you can win that one. So NIST actually called for additional PQC signatures. And it is due in a month. The official reason was that, they want some other assumptions, structured lattices that have shorter signatures maybe, but, I don't think that's the real reason. And, well, it stopped the bloodbath for now, so I think this has satisfied the Belgians. So then there's other government agencies. So like I said before, for one reason or another, NIST, maybe somebody does not want to use a NIST standard. Right? And that's okay. So other government agencies kind of looked at this pool of candidates that was submitted to NIST, and they said, well, maybe we want to use something else. And so 2 somewhat popular ones, actually, especially in France and Germany and Europe, is Frodo, which is based on slightly unstructured lattices, and I'll explain a little bit what this means, and also Macalise, which is a hidden GOPA code, so it's a code-based scheme. So my personal opinion is, so I have no problem with either of these. This is a perfectly fine thing. I cannot justify to anyone, hey, you should really use Kyber, or if you want to use something else, it's perfectly fine. There's no reason why you should think that Kyber is more secure than something else. The one thing that is a little bit, bothersome is how little attention people pay to quantum cryptanalysis, because the point for these things is to be secure against quantum attacks. And so Macalise, for example, it's a code-based scheme, but it's, there's a hidden GOPA code in there. And I have no idea if any quantum algorithms person has looked at this problem. Of course, this has been around since the 70s, but how well studied has it been in the quantum world? Lattices may be a little bit better because it kind of came from the quantum world almost. And now even like LWE is used to prove some results that nothing to do with crypto, just quantum results that you can verify quantum circuits, and it's somehow based on LWE. So there, I think quantum people looking more into it. Still, I wouldn't say I'm super happy with the amount of cryptanalysis going on there, but at least it's something. So personally, I would trust, if you want to not choose the NIST standard, Frodo kind of makes sense. So let me just explain the difference between structured and unstructured lattices. So the learning with errors problem, I guess everyone knows. So it kind of looks like this. You have some random matrix, 1, 2, okay, not super random, but it's random. And then you multiply it by a short vector, which is secret. You add a small error, and you get a result. So I chose mod 10, but okay, whatever. It's a different modulus. So this is learning with errors. Then there is ring learning with errors. The only difference there is that it works over an algebraic ring, and the way you can think about it is the matrix is now structured. So, so the first column is random. The second column is the rotation of the first column, and then you negate the first coefficient. And then the third column is the second column rotated, and you negate the top coefficient again. Okay, so that's ring LWE. And then there is something in the middle, which is like module LWE, which is a combination of, kind of something in between. It's exactly that, something in between, where you kind of break up your matrix into little quadrants, for example, and then you only rotate within that quadrant. So you have the 1, 5 becomes 5, 1, 9, 8 becomes 2, 9, so things like that. So it's really just how this initial random matrix is structured. Sorry, so I said I will not teach you about the schemes, and I'm not trying to trick you. This is background for the jokes. So then there's the, later on. So there's the structured versus unstructured lattices, right? So structured lattices are let's say the ones with the purple stuff. The unstructured one is the one on top. So the main thing about, the main difference is that, the main advantage of these structured things is that they take less bits, let's say, to represent. And so, because the first one, it's all random, so you need 16 numbers. The second one, well, from the first column, you can generate the whole thing. Okay, so that's kind of the idea, sort of. So there's the Kyber and Frodo, right? So you can use structured versus unstructured. Of course, you would prefer for security unstructured. The less structured, the better. But you have this problem that, well, if it's structured, it can be much shorter. So public key and ciphertexts are about 1 kilobyte, whereas unstructured is about 15 kilobytes. But, so is it worth it? Is it worth it security-wise? And I don't know, maybe. But you also always have to think, all right, but look, we don't have to use the 1 kilobyte. We can increase its size to something else. We can use a much bigger lattice. So let's say, for example, if you increase it to something like 6 kilobytes, you have about 1,200 bits of security for a structured lattice. So is that better? You're still shorter than the unstructured one, but now you have 1,200 bits of security. I don't know, right? So the question is, will the new attacks, if they ever exist, will they exploit the structure? So this algebraic structure, is that the problem? If it is, well then, yeah, unstructured is better. But of course, the other thing could happen. What if new attacks are against all lattices? And currently, this is the state of the art. Kind of all the attacks are generic. Then maybe the right thing to have done, if you're worried about, if you want something stronger than what NIST is giving, maybe you want to have your own standard and enlarge the structured one, right? Or maybe you want to do something in the middle, right? Maybe you want to protect against, maybe you don't need 1,200 bits of security. That's a bit ridiculous. We hope an algorithm doesn't take it down to nothing. And so maybe you want to combine both, right? Since the structured one is so small, maybe just adding it just to have the 1,200, the huge dimension is something that's worth it, right? So these are questions that one could ask, and things that one could do, and I haven't seen these done by people who said we don't want to use NIST standards, we want to go with something else. But you could do something in the middle, for example, which also makes sense. So this is just, I'm not saying you should do it, but this is something that maybe one could consider doing. All right, so kind of the standardization finished. But of course, there were attacks on other schemes. And then the interesting part, and of course you have to, I don't want to say conspiracy theories, but at least you have to think about, could something bad has happened? Because, there was the problem where the NSA inserted a backdoor into a random number generator and kind of bribed the company to use it. And so there was a problem there. So it is completely normal to always ask questions, So the first thing I want to say is that, well, it's not actually, a backdoor is not possible in this case because all the public randomness in these schemes is generated from a PRG, like SHA-3 or Shake. So there's no possible way to put a backdoor in. So, but if you're really still convinced, talk to the Ketchuk team. That's where the back door could be. But they're Belgian, so please be careful. Okay, so but then, you know, you could have, but this doesn't stop people from coming up with more conspiracy theories. So the only one that sort of has been around is that, well, this is DJB. He says, well, it's not hard to imagine that the NSA has been working at this before 2003. True. I hope they have been. And that they're years ahead of the public in finding attacks. I don't know. And the last one is the one it's probably false, is that the NSA has been pushing NIST to select algorithms that NSA secretly knows how to break. So the problem is the same argument was made when people didn't want to use elliptic curve crypto. And you could make, and this is an argument you can make against anyone, any scheme that NIST selected. You could say exactly this, right? But this is extremely unlikely and dangerous, right? Because these are the algorithms that the NSA said the US government itself must use. So you cannot base security on the fact that no one else will find the same algorithm. So I would completely discard this one. You could think of, so I'm going to propose some which are maybe a little bit better. Basically, what would I do if I were in charge of the NSA and I wanted to kind of fix this competition? It could know, so the NSA could know that a lower security parameter set is broken. So they have, let's say they have analyzed this for 20 years, they have better attacks. So let's say they can decrease security by 50 bits. Right, so what the NSA, and they're pretty sure that, you know, you can't do better because they spent a lot of time on it. Kind of like with RSA, for example, with factoring, let's say the NSA is 20 years ahead and they discovered the number field sieve before everyone else. Okay, so what NSA could do in this case is only allow for the highest level, security level to be used, and maybe they hope that others use a lower security level. Yeah, maybe, right? Then they can break into devices that use the lower security. This is still, I would say, a bit dangerous because the secrets could still be valuable to American interests, right? Because if you say, yes, Kyber is okay, but only 256 bits, somebody would say, well, maybe 128-bit is okay too, and yeah, it's more likely that they're not themselves using broken algorithms, but still a bit dangerous because others, especially in America, would trust the US government to kind of not give them broken standards. Now, a more likely thing is why not, a foreign government tries to infiltrate the NIST competition. I mean, this is open to everyone. I'm not going to blame the Belgians here. Right? The jokes have stopped. So let's say the foreign intelligence has a secret break to some widely known scheme. It submits the scheme and tries to get it standardized. So there's no fix. They just really try hard to get it standardized. And there's no reason why somebody wouldn't do something like this, right? So it's a huge win. If it succeeds, great. They're reading everyone's email. If it doesn't, if it succeeds and somebody finds an attack, it's an embarrassment. Yeah, this is what you should do. If you're a foreign government, you should do this. Now, if you're the NSA, on the other hand, this is what I would do. Maybe I would do this. If I had to do something, this would be it. I would, if I know an algorithm is broken, and of course, how do I know it's broken? Because as was said, it's been hard at work since 2003. They're years ahead of the public in finding attacks. So let's say I could break something. What I would do is I would tell NIST to push it as far as possible up and then not select it. And then the hope is that others still use the unselected final round algorithms. And the cherry on top would be if they use them because they don't trust NIST and the NSA, right? So this is still a bit dangerous, but I mean, the irony, you got to do it. So this is really, so if you want to think of a conspiracy theory, so I mean, the second thing is a foreign government, that's not a conspiracy, that's just obvious, someone could do it, and the only attack against this is cryptanalysis. But this one, why not, right? I mean, I don't want to take a poll, who would do this, who wouldn't, but yeah. Okay. I'll admit, I would. But the reality, it's fun to think about, but the reality is probably very boring. I mean, it's, as I said, as the quote said, it's not hard to imagine they've been working on this for a very long time, and now they're just confident in lattice cryptography, or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a downer, but yeah, I would guess that's probably what it is. At least they're definitely not using themselves schemes that are broke. All right, so some other things that happened in the competition that maybe this could be a lesson for the future. So intellectual property. So this is something like, I think it's universal. So I was at a bar just talking to a person next to me, and I don't know, normally becomes you start discussing what would you do if you could do anything, and if I said nothing, I would do nothing. I would just sit on a beach and it's like, okay, well, maybe a little more. Like, okay, fine. I would hike, and I would write reviews about the things I use while on my hikes. So, I mean, there was a bit of a disappointment in my lack of ambition. So then she said, come on, but like anything. I said, all right, if I had unlimited funds, I would take down the IP industry. And there, she, yeah, okay. And yeah, so it turned out she was an engineer or a completely different field, a car company. I was like, yes, that is exactly, we're stuck with these, we plug in a cable, and it's like, is that patented? Is plugging a cable into the entertainment system a patent? And sometimes it is, or if you plug it in, and hold a button rather than press a button, is that? And this is a huge problem, right? So, I mean, the way it works, and I was very naive about this, so this is more of a kind of a lesson. Maybe it's obvious to everyone, but like to me, this is kind of new. This was pretty new. So, you have this prior work. Some of it is obvious, some of it is not, but it's whatever, patented, not patented, papers, doesn't matter. So then, there's this prior work, and then a patent appears. And it kind of, it's not exactly what the prior work is, but it's very close, and you could argue it's kind of obvious, but it's not, it got patented, whatever. Okay, fine, so don't do that. Okay, so far it's not a huge issue, but then there's a product that also is not exactly like the prior work, right? But it's also very close and kind of obvious. But then what somebody could do is say, oh, but actually the product is really close to the patent. And now you have to go ahead and prove, no, all those blue circles are kind of basically surrounding it. There's no way this patent is covering it. And now you have a fight, right? So this is the problem. For example, what happened, concrete example, or hypothetical, well, no, it's concrete, okay. So there was LWE, learning with errors, right? So this is, if you remember the slide I told you, I'm not trying to teach you anything, this is where it's coming in. You have that. You had encryption from learning with errors with small secrets, no problem. So it all existed. Nobody's contesting its sort of novelty or whatever. And then there's ring LWE. So this is the structured LWE. And so we had the encryption. And then, but you didn't have the encryption with small secrets because it's kind of obvious, but this became a patent. Okay, fine. So it does look kind of, if you do the same, something with the top, you could do the same thing with the bottom. Why is it a patent? Well, the argument was, well, because it's rings, because it's a ring thing, not a matrix, you can now multiply, you can do commutative multiplication. It's like, okay, but you don't have to do it. But you could, but why? Okay, anyway. So this was a patent. Okay, fine, no problem. Then came module LWE, the thing in the middle I showed you, right? And then so Kyber is encryption for module LWE with small secrets, right? So it's the bottom one. So now the question is, well, I mean, why does it come, why is it derived from the bottom, from the middle one, rather than from the top one? I mean, if anything, now you don't even have this commutativity, so there's nothing to do, there's nothing really that you need from the second one. And so when, this kind of came up, and I thought, well, okay, I mean, this is probably obviously like lawyers involved here, so this is just a misunderstanding. And you know, if I just explain it to everyone, this will be cleared up, no problem. This is, you know, just you know, there's no malicious intent, just really a misunderstanding. And it was a misunderstanding, right? But the misunderstanding was not on their part, it was on my part. So, you know, I think everyone understands what's going on here. So this is kind of how obvious it was to everyone else, except me and maybe Damien, who also spent a lot of time, you know, clearing up these misunderstandings by, yeah. So, you know, here we all know what's going on, except maybe the clerk who says, well, okay, I see what's happening. There's a person who's asking for money. We are a bank. We do deposits and withdrawals, nothing out of the ordinary, except for the, you know, for the hands up. I don't know why that's necessary. So, okay, so just give me your account number and ID, and, you know, we will. So, but, you know, he's not, so he's really misunderstanding the situation, even though, you know, money is something they handle. So this is basically what happens in these cases, right? That people just say, look, I will just extend the patent, and you know, and then we'll have a shootout and see what happens. So really, the misunderstanding was on our side as to what's happening. So here are the other bad things that could happen with a patent. Right, so everyone knows this, like there's the first-degree trolling, right? You threaten a frivolous lawsuit for using a product. I mean, this is not a surprise to anyone. But it's not even like filing one, it's threatening one, right? That's the bigger issue. Then there's also something that I wasn't aware, but okay, I guess kind of obvious as well. There's also like the second-degree trolling. So if you make a product yourself, and then you can threaten that some other person who's possibly a first-degree troll has a patent on a competing product and will sue you. So really, you should be using, you know, my product instead of some other one, which could be. And this one even, you know, has some bonus points attached to it because, so first, what you can do, I mean, the person may not even be a troll, right? Who you're threatening that will sue you. He may not even be aware of anything, but you can actually help him expand his patent. So that's something else that can happen if you file a patent. Somebody can, even if you didn't intend it, maybe you had very good intentions, but somebody could do something like this, and then they could also act like actually their product is saving the world from patents, right? So this is, again, bad things that can happen. Another bad thing that can happen is that completely unrelated parties get involved. And now it's not even science and lawyers. Now it's governments. And so actually this Kyber, it kind of went to, you know, the Department of State, and I mean, kind of almost the I think to the White House level in the US, to the LAZ level in France, and they were not talking about modularity there, right? There was, now it's part of a package for nuclear submarines, right? So now your patent is, and so, you know, there's the tweet from the US government saying, we thank the French for their engagement. I think maybe it's a very carefully worded tweet because they didn't really thank them for contribution, they just thanked them for their engagement, which, okay, it's true, but we applaud, actually, no, they didn't thank, we applaud. It's like, well done, well, well played. Okay, so maybe it's not so bad. Maybe, yeah, I didn't give them enough credit. Okay, yeah, but like, there's no reason why, I mean, you don't want unintended consequences, right? So what can we do as people who don't have unlimited funds to fight the IP thing? So all we can do is, we can realize that, look, even in this situation, it's hard, you know, once the situation gets to this point, it's really, I don't want to blame anyone for doing something wrong in that situation. You know, the lawyers have a job. Okay, that's their job. The patent owners have an incentive to let the lawyers do their job. The politicians, they don't care. They have other problems, and they said, this can be a pawn that we use. Let's use it. Maybe, you know, so it's hard. Like, if you just come into that situation, it's hard to blame anyone. So I think what you have to do is you have to nip the situation in the bud and just don't be tempted to create patents. And so something I do to not be tempted, this is really for myself, because sometimes you are tempted, right? And if you're tempted, the situation can get out of control pretty fast. So I just write in the grant, it's my goal to keep all work funded by this project open source and royalty free. That's it. So if someone says, hey, you should patent, I say, no, I cannot. I have this grant. And if I'm tempted, I say, well, I can't lie. And I don't know, I think it works, because there were times I was like, oh, maybe I should, but no, it's written, I cannot. Right, and even if you work for a university, it's not guaranteed that it will not be used it will not be used for bad purposes. So there's an article by in EFF, on the EFF website, that 15 American universities formed a company that looks like a patent troll. So basically what they do is they have patents, and which are not very useful because they couldn't get any startup with it. So they said, okay, look, we're just going to release it, and any lawyer that would like to use our patent to sue someone else can do it, and we just get some, we just get some kickbacks from it. This is obviously not something you want. And so the one solution that, EFF, of course, they will say something like this, is that when taxpayers fund research, the fruits should be available to all. I think this is much closer to what I believe than the current situation. And I think we can do something about this by just not filing patents. Okay, anyway. So now, luckily, all this situation has been resolved, and we can move to quantum safe. All right, so of course, this all started with the NSA. So the NSA said, okay, we want quantum safe algorithms, so they got quantum safe algorithms. So they chose Kyber, dilithium, and some other ones that were already NIST standards, just for software signing, and they only chose the highest security level. And then, okay, so everyone has chosen something, and now the question you often get is, when do I need to switch to quantum safe? So this is a very tough question, obviously, because no one knows when we'll have a quantum computer that can break RSA and discrete lock, right? No one knows. You can, of course, make guesses and give probabilities, but these are not useful, right? Let's say there's a 5% chance in 7 years. What do? Do I have to calculate how much risk, how much money I will lose in 5 years? This is impossible, right? So this is analysis paralysis, and this is why I actually like what the NSA did. They said, we don't care when the quantum computer is coming. This is when you're going to switch. So the US government must be completely switched over by 2033. That's it, right? So all the questions have stopped, and this is now the answer. So now people are working who care about this. They're working hard to try to get everything switched over by 2033. So it made everyone's life easier. When do I have to switch? This is the timeline. All right, so I think the kind of the simple algorithms are basically done. So we have encryption, we have digital signatures, but now, as we know, I think a lot of us here, we now work on zero knowledge and privacy. And zero knowledge is a really amazing concept started in the 80s, but trying to get zero knowledge and privacy into practice, no luck. Right? So of course it started, there was digital cash by Schaum, then there's, I would say, anonymous credentials, the umbrella term for all this privacy-based stuff. And I don't know what happened in the 80s and 90s. I wasn't around, but when I came to IBM in 2015, they were trying really, really hard to get these anonymous credentials where you can have this digital ID and you can prove just certain information and hide everything else. I mean, it seemed like a great idea, and they were trying very hard to get it. The technology was great. And just nothing. I mean, you just could not, no one wanted to use it. Just there was no application. I don't know. And so you have this amazing concept, zero knowledge. You had applications that use it, which made perfect sense. It was fast. It was nothing, right? And so let me just explain what anonymous credentials are. So you have some user, you have an issuer, and you have a verifier. It's a very common sense thing. So the user sends blind, it's an extension of blind signatures. So he blinds some credentials, I don't know, my age, my nationality, to the issuer. The issuer signs these credentials without knowing exactly what they are. And then the user can present to the verifier any credential he wants, right? So he can present, my age, my nationality, so I'm American, and the fact that the issuer really signed that I'm American, and hide everything else. And even the issuer, when he sees these things, he cannot link who is really the user that is, all anyone, including the issuer, knows about me is that I have this credential C1. So digital ID, beautiful, lots of zero, and this is just one application. There's tons of others, nothing, really nothing. Well, enter Bitcoin. Okay, so Still no zero knowledge, right? So this then became the argument of distributed versus centralized currency. Okay, so I admit I picked a particularly nonsensical quote, but a lot of them are similar, right? So this one says, look, Bitcoin allows you to plan for the future and you don't have to worry about bankers in smoke-filled rooms somewhere. And with deflationary money, everything will be cheaper, not more expensive. So it sounds amazing, deflation. Why haven't we thought of deflation? Okay, yeah, this is nonsense, right? But a lot of it was, a lot of the arguments for decentralized currency, distributed currency, are similar, right? We're taking away the power from someone else, but but giving it to who, right? So my view is that a decentralized system will eventually become ordered, right? If there's a power vacuum, somebody will step in. So just an example, right? Does anyone believe that, you had Bitcoin, okay, fine, great, but then this huge currency, cryptocurrency network formed around it, and now people are inserting money into Bitcoin, right? Does anyone believe that stable coins are 100% backed by fiat? No, I don't think so. I don't think anyone believes that. But, and they are creating money, right? Just like, so these are the people that are now the faceless bankers in a smoke-filled room. And actually, I think right now we don't have faceless bankers, at least in democracy. We actually know who they are. Now they really are faceless something, right? But this, self-delusion must continue, or else the whole system falls apart. Right, so I really don't think that, I think the bigger issue here is that technology cannot replace law. The only thing, if you don't like the system, you have to change the law. If you just rely on technology, somebody will take advantage of it, much more than you will, right? So okay, so then so still there's no zero knowledge. So what happened? Well, there's another brilliant idea. So let's allow the powerful parties to be anonymous. That's what Bitcoin does, and to hide everything that they do, right? So this is now the idea where zero knowledge can help. And this, okay, I'm very happy that zero knowledge get used, right? But, not for this, right? But it became big, right? This is, privacy-based cryptocurrency, right? It got everyone's attention, right? It's exciting, it's controversial, it's full of ethical questions, right? To me, this is when somebody cannot get attention and does this is like, this is zero knowledge makes a sex tape, right? This was the moment, but you know what? It worked. It always works, right? Now central banks see this, and the applications that we had before that we could not, that nobody wanted to use, now saying, actually, this is what we want. And, okay, great. So it makes me very happy. And this is why I also think that complaining about cryptocurrency, so maybe what I was doing 2 minutes ago, is pointless, right? You say Bitcoin uses more energy than Finland. Crypto allows for anonymous dark markets. It's intrinsically worthless, value going to zero. Yeah, okay, but you can counter every argument. Finland, let's cut Finland off the grid, and then we, there's so many people without power. What's 6 million more? Saying X is bad is a very hard argument to win when X has a very loyal following and makes people money. Right, so for example, and this is not a nice example, so a big argument for pro-gun people in the US was, well, if you're going to ban guns, you should ban cars too, because they kill more people. Well, not anymore, right? So, and still nothing is going to happen, right? And, being intrinsically worthless, it's going to go to zero. Will it? We had there was the NFTs, right? That was pretty big. You had these monkeys or apes, and they were bored. I don't even remember what it was. People said, this is so stupid, digital art, it makes no sense. Okay, but if you're going to make an argument that because something is stupid, it's going to go to zero, you have to make that about everything. But you know what else is stupid? Like real art, right? So, not because it's pretty, right? But not pretty, but like you have an argument about something, but then let's say you know nothing and you read this argument. Why was this 51 million? Well, because this red square is really big. And so but maybe if you know this, you're like, yeah, this. But does this make more sense than anything else, right? So no. So I would say no need to complain. The technology is amazing, and it keeps getting better. So people working on this, maybe the motives are not quite. I don't quite agree with them, but the technology is great, and this is what kind of inspired it. Right? And so, and the nice thing about zero knowledge and all this privacy stuff is that you can really use the exact same technology, and only small changes will be needed to obtain virtually any policy that one wants. And so now maybe if you're afraid, but if the banks start using this, now we're going to lose all privacy. But I think no, we're actually going to have privacy, and the reason is this. So why do companies actually like privacy? So there are reasons against privacy, right? Well, if you don't promise privacy, you can sell user data. That makes money. You can also use user data to make the user happier. So if you know more about the user, you can kind of tell them which restaurant to go to, and so really to help the user. So this is good, and the user will be happy. But then there's also arguments for privacy. So first of all, it sounds good, and people think they want it. Of course, there's also keeping their user away from competitors. But I think the main reason why a lot of companies and even banks or whatever, anyone else wants privacy is because there's no liability for user behavior. And I think every company does not want to have liability, so they argue for privacy, and they say, well, we don't know what they're doing. If it's a law, if it's okay to have privacy, they say, look, we don't know what the user is doing. Okay, so I think we will have privacy. Maybe not for the reasons that everyone loves privacy, but there will be selfish reasons why we will have privacy. And then, so now actually central banks and banks, they want that. And then, so they say this, and then they also say, we also want quantum safe because, I don't know, because, well, the things we do are kind of shady, so we don't want them to be known in the future. So then the question is, should they be quantum safe by design right away? And the answer I usually give is that, well, you should definitely be quantum safe against harvest and decrypt. So you should not just use classical encryption. You should not use computationally hiding commitments. It should all be secure. If somebody stores the information, harvests the information now, they should be able to, should not be able to decrypt it. And there should be a simple path to quantum safe. So, for example, you should not be using primitives that probably will not have quantum safe equivalents, efficient ones. So I think non-interactive key exchange is much less efficient. OPRFs are going to be much more less efficient. Threshold anything will probably be very different. So my predictions for moving to quantum safe are the following. So I think that zero knowledge proofs will be much more important to quantum safe than for classical schemes in the classical world, because there's a lot of things we can build kind of generically with zero knowledge proofs that we cannot build otherwise, but we could with classical schemes, just because we don't have enough algebraic structure. I also think that more efficient, so there's a lot of work on zero knowledge proofs, but I think that more efficient zero knowledge proofs can be built based on lattice assumptions than with just hash functions, but both will remain relevant. And the simple reason for it is, okay, now we have it, and also because once you make a computational assumption, it's obviously going to help you, right? So you will be able to do something better based on computational assumptions. And for added efficiency, we'll have assumptions beyond the standard lattice ones. And so now I want to maybe a little bit talk about actual technical things that maybe this can help, with privacy in the quantum safe world. So how to build things based on lattices. So this is the fundamental lattice equation. AS equals T, so you have a public A, you have a secret S, you multiply A by S, you get T, and norm of S is small. This appears everywhere. Many schemes require proving knowledge of such an S. So this is the discrete log equation of the classical world. This is the equation of the lattice world. And of course, the SIS or LWE problem, depends how you set up A, is you're given A and T, and you're asked to find S. Okay, so The comparison with discrete log, why are things a bit harder in the lattice world, is the following. So in the lattice world, we have as equals t where s is small. In the discrete log, you just have g to the s equals t. You don't have this restriction on s. And the restriction on s is the hard part. This is just an algebraic relation, while in the lattice world, you have an algebraic relation and a range proof and a quadratic relation over z. Right? So the norm is a quadratic relation over z. A range proof is to show that the norm is small. So this is where things get less efficient. And, but there's been a lot of work in this area. So about 2018, there was, we were just using kind of generic techniques from coding-based zero-knowledge proofs, but then they've really improved in the last 5 years. So we went from proving simple relations from just like 3 megabytes, now it's just a few dozen kilobytes. Right, so this is efficient, and even more interesting is some work that worked for sublinear zero-knowledge proofs. So for any relation, and there was nothing in 2018, you had to use generic hash-based stuff, and now you can get something that is around 60 kilobytes, maybe even less. So you can, basically, snarks are quite compact with lattices. So I want to, but the thing is, we still want to, 12 is still better than 60, and we want to use the linear, this proof system as much as possible. So it's very fast, just a few milliseconds. So lattice-based zero-knowledge proofs, if you just want to prove simple relations, are quite nice. So I'm just going to give a very short outline of how this was done. You have to, how these algebraic relations were proved. So we have this ring, whatever ring, and we already knew how to prove linear relations over this ring. So this just came with commitment schemes. So then later you can actually prove quadratic relations. So this was the work, these are the works that started this whole push. Now you can prove quadratic relations over the ring. Then you can prove inner products over the integers. So now kind of moving to the integers becomes a little more difficult, but you can do that. And then you do proofs of inner products over the integers. So kind of these kind of simple steps, logical steps, I'm not going to talk about zero-knowledge proofs. Maybe some of you are going to this workshop in Lausanne on Monday. It's going to be there, but it should be online somewhere as well. So this is what has been done in lattices. And combining zero-knowledge proofs with trapdoor sampling gets you anonymous credentials. And I will shortly explain this, mostly because I don't think, not because I think this is the most interesting thing, but I think the new assumption, I want some cryptanalysts to break it or attack it and say they cannot break it. Okay, so lattices, a lot of lattices, this started in 2008, is based on the security of giving out pre-images. So for example, if you have a random matrix A, and I have an oracle, the following oracle, so it generates a vector Y, and then samples an S from some distribution where the norm of S is small, such that AS equals Y. So it does pre-image sampling. Is this oracle useful? So it is useless because the same distribution SY can be generated the other way around. So you generate a small s and then compute AS equals Y. So if the distributions are the same, then this oracle that gives you out pre-images is not very useful. So this was the kind of the basis of this breakthrough work of GPV with their signature scheme, Gentry, Piker, and Tunathan. So they had a random matrix A, and they basically had an oracle. When given a message, it generates a small s, which is the pre-image of the random oracle. So m should be x. The pre-image of h of x, right? Because it's a random oracle, it's the same thing as a random thing, right? So this is useless because s h of x can be generated by moving forward, generating an s, computing as equals y, and then programming h of x to be y, right? So this is the GPV signature scheme. So then the question that we want to ask is, the problem is that if you want to start doing zero-knowledge proofs, now you have to do zero-knowledge proofs on H. And if H is a random oracle, it's not great. And even if it's like some structured function people are using for zero-knowledge proofs, it's still not super great because the domain of, you have to map into the lattice domain, which is much bigger. So it's not just 32 bytes to 32 bytes, it's 32 bytes to quite a bit. So you maybe don't want to use a random oracle, so this is a question. What if H is not a random oracle? What if you have an oracle that generates an X in some set M, and then generates a small s from a distribution that AS equals f of X? right? So you can no longer argue that f of x is random because x is known, f is known, and it's not a random, you can't model as a random oracle. Is this hard? Is this oracle useful to generate preimages of another, of something new, right? So can I then, if I'm given preimages of f of x for random x, can I create a preimage of f of x star for a random x star that's given to me? Even if f is a linear function. So this looks extremely dangerous. And actually, when we were trying to build anonymous credentials, we had something very complicated. And we wrote, well, you obviously cannot do this. But then then erased it because it's actually not obvious at all that this is dangerous. So for example, even if it's linear, right? So let's say I give you preimages of f of x1, f of x2. So now you can, they're linear, you can combine them. So now you have a preimage of x1 plus x2. Okay, so this is the dangerous part, right? Because now you have preimages of something new. And S1 plus S2 is still kind of small. But the problem is x1 plus x2 may not be in this set M, right? So this is the part that makes it not obvious at all that this is dangerous, right? So it's linear, but the set itself is not. So for example, let's say M is the set of binary vectors. So if you have preimages for random x1 and x2, well, x1 plus x2 is not going to be binary, right? So there's very low probability of that. You can definitely find some combination that gets you back a binary vector, but now the preimages become much larger. And this is kind of, this is the limit of my cryptanalytic ability. So kind of stopped and said, well, it's probably secure. And I don't know how many lattice cryptanalysts are here, but this seems like a very natural problem to replace a random oracle with something else that, that allows for more efficient zero-knowledge proofs. And so we made this assumption, the sys f with the f. So you're given an oracle that generates a random x in some set. You're given lots of preimages for it. You're given preimages for this f of x. And can you come up with a fresh s star x star so that as star equals f of x star? Okay. I mean, this is a high-level thing. I mean, the exact definition is in the paper. And then if you can do that, you can build anonymous credentials. So you have basically you have the user and the issuer, right? The user has a public key. There's some public randomness and the linear function. So what the user does is he commits to his credentials. So this is kind of the obvious thing to do. This is kind of like the Fish-Lin blind signature approach. So the thing to do if you just have zero-knowledge proofs and trapdoor functions. So you have a small norm vector C, which for kind of brevity will contain the credentials and the commitment. And then you just commit to it, and you give a zero-knowledge proof that it's of the right form. Then the bank will just check the proof. Then he will choose a random x, and then use the trapdoor to compute S with a small norm, the preimage of t plus f of x. So no, it's not f of x, it's t plus f of x, but t was of a special form. And then he sends the S back, and then the user just outputs the credential he wants, and the zero-knowledge proof that he knows all the rest. And the point is that if f is a linear function, he's just proving linear relations. And this is very efficient. Okay? So, but this is actually, like I said, this is t plus f of x, so this is the interactive ISIS function, ISIS assumption. So now you're not really given access to random preimages of f of x. You're actually sending some low norm vector c, and then you're getting preimages of, so s of bc plus f of x. So you can sort of modify the target a little bit. And the question is still the same. Okay? So this is the assumption. If time permits, hopefully not, and it does not. That's wonderful. So there is a reduction between the two, which is not hard, but I don't want to talk about it. And the result is that it's pretty efficient. So it's you get schemes that based on this interactive ISIS, which are quite short. If you want a full reduction to this other ISIS, I don't think it has to be this bad. It doesn't go by a factor of 5. You can do it less, but we didn't really try that much. And I honestly don't think for lattices you would be able to do much better than this. Maybe 20, 18, but you're not going to get something with 1 or 2. So it's still definitely a lot worse than things you get with strong RSA and you know, other funny assumptions based on pairings. But it might even be faster because, for example, lattice encryption schemes are faster than elliptic curve ones. So efficiency-wise, it's definitely doable. Yeah, so this is basically what I wanted to talk about, right? Privacy from lattices and stuff. So there's one area which is zero knowledge and applications. That's privacy. There's another big area which I did not talk about, which is very related to lattices, right? Which is FHE, right? But that's a whole thing on its own, and right, I mean, it's there, and I'm sorry for not mentioning it. I hope no Belgian is involved in it, so that it does not attack other schemes because of it. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's time for questions. If people have questions, please come to the microphones at the front. So while people consider their questions, you mentioned unbalanced oil and vinegar very briefly. You also mentioned, oh, maybe you want to compare something like Frodo Cam and Ring LWE. So can you have something like unbalanced module LWE? Unbalanced module LWE to get a bit of best of the both worlds, or is that completely nonsensical?
What is balanced module?
I don't know, but with balanced, everything looks the same, I guess. The squares are the same.
Do you want the matrix to have some holes in it, or?
Well, maybe rather. So you had a 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, and maybe you can have like a 1 by 1 and a 5 by 5 instead. So
I see. So actually, you could. So you could have, let's say, the top row be, small degree power, and the bottom one a larger degree. So the reason, no, it's not. So this is something that could be useful somewhere. But the point is, in lattices, if you have if you're working over a larger ring, you can always write it as sort of isomorphic operations over a smaller ring. So then it's not going to be any harder than of working over a smaller ring, but yeah, you could. But I'm not. The thing is, you don't really get much of an I don't believe there's much of a security gain if you work over much smaller rings than slightly larger rings. So I think either you go down to LWE or just kind of modular LWE with just a little bit, like Kyber is good enough. But yeah, the unbalanced thing is an assumption that sometimes is useful to make in some cases. If that's yeah, Shweta?
Hi. So you said that you expect that zero knowledge will be used much more with lattices than with like discrete log things.
Quantum safe, yeah.
Quantum safe, yeah. Because there's less structure and there are lots of applications where using groups and DL stuff you can do it, and then with lattices and quantum safe assumptions you can't. So off the top of your head, like what are the top 5 such applications?
Top 5. I'll give you top 1. So the top one is so first of all, so for example, blind signatures.
Yes.
I think that's one, and I'd say anonymous credentials is 2. Threshold. Threshold signatures.
Yeah.
I would say you just do it with zero knowledge in the trivial way.
Yes.
Because
yes.
I mean, this is something people have tried to do. I've very briefly tried to do, zero success.
Yeah.
Because
so from discrete log, the threshold signatures, for example, are efficient?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know that they're not from lattices. Okay. Okay, that's 3 is fine. Okay, thanks.
Well, first I want to confirm that the NIST PQC was in fact quite boring.
Until the
And-
end, until the end.
Until and also, I'm wondering about the IP situation. You gave a potential solution that involves like the individual responsibility. I was wondering if you have any ideas on what maybe NIST could do or at an organization level.
So definitely not have, I know nothing about IP, right? As kind of demonstrated by my incompetence when faced with problems. But I think something that NIST could have done, or organizations could have done ahead of time, and I think this is something they did say, yeah, they kind of wish they did, is ahead of time do a huge IP search, right? There's a lot of effort, and then think of all the things that could have been bad, and then you can file these, okay, demonstrating my lack of knowledge here again. So there are these things you can file ahead of time saying we have a scheme and we want to say that the IP, whatever this IP does not cover the scheme. So you can kind of get ahead of the game, and then it's up to the IP owner to either ignore it and say, okay, whatever, or fight it. But of course, now all the power is now with you, because if he fights it, well, he will lose money. If he loses money. If he wins, we just won't use his stuff. So he has nothing to gain. So this is a very powerful weapon that should be used in the future and could have been used. But of course, it also requires a lot of groundwork to figure out what IP could possibly be used, right? So I think this is the one thing you can do. The other thing I really think is really individual responsibility for us.
Okay, are there any further questions? Margot?
Maybe a little bit of a follow-up question on the IP stuff, because it's super important. Yeah, I guess like what big companies do, like IBM, they kind of build up an arsenal of IP so that they have more IP than other companies, and so if someone tries to annoy them, then they will annoy them even more with their IP. So that seems to work maybe for big companies, but it doesn't seem to work like for the general population. So do you have any way of kind of doing something a bit smarter that kind of also helps like the individuals, some legal engineering or something like GPL license type thing or common criteria? And I mean, some smart lawyer probably has to do some adversarial thinking and find something, because that's even beyond cryptographic adversarial thinking.
Yeah, right, exactly. So maybe, I mean, you called me out. I'm speaking from a fairly privileged position where I'm lucky that our managerial chain realized that you should not be creating security IP, because then things are not going to be compatible, no one's going to use it. So the IP, like you said, is for products, and it's mostly defensive. Just if you annoy us, we will annoy you, and okay, it wastes everyone's time, but when Google and Microsoft, I don't know who, they had a patent war, they were just piling up the IP, and no one would read it. They would just kind of weigh the stacks. So for small companies, yeah, it's definitely a much harder thing. But so I have obviously no solution, right? If there was an easy solution, it would be done. But I at least think that it's not so bad if you have IP and then you actually make a product, right? And this is, so you can say whatever, like RSA. And they made a product, right? So this was completely new, and they had IP, and they profited very well. It came from university, right? Akamai, same thing, right? So, and the small company, sure, if you make a product with some brilliant idea, that's all right. Yeah, sure, of course, we all wish it was available to everyone for free, but that's not how the world works, right? But I think the biggest problem, at least what I was trying to say, is that if you make IP with no intention to market, to make a product out of it, then there's a good chance it'll be used for something bad. And maybe that's something you should not do. But if you think I'm going to start a company, okay, then it's not so bad. Right?
Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. We'll have a coffee break next, so thanks Vadim again.
Hello, because I saw your face and I was like, we've only met virtually.